Hi, I'm Terry Macco. I head up the communications and marketing function for World Wildlife Fund in the US. Just a little bit of background on WWF. We also have David Miller here, who is the CEO of WWF Canada. We are a federation of organizations. WWF has over 32 different national organizations globally, and we're all unified by the World Wildlife Fund brand because we all share in the same mission, but we're geographically dispersed. It's wonderful because it allows each of our organizations to be really localized for our constituents, right? So you think of it almost like as a franchise model behind one big overarching mission. And our overarching mission is to protect the biodiversity on Earth and to reduce the human footprint on the planet. And what I hope to do today is to walk you through one case study that I think really highlights some of the issues that we talked about in the very first session. I particularly loved the idea of a big, simple message repeated often by trusted individuals can really have an impact. And so hopefully you'll see that today. So WWF is best known for its work on endangered species. We're over 50 years old, but our work has grown to involve so much more than that. So while endangered species are still at the heart of our work, it's really much more about protecting the habitats where those species live and the people who share those habitats with endangered species. So our work extends to protecting forests around the world, saving marine habitats, promoting sustainable fisheries, working on ensuring there are freshwater, ample freshwater supplies for humans, and fighting against the biggest threats to the planet. And those for us are identified as climate change, which we've heard a lot about today, as well as our need to feed a very hungry and growing planet. And agriculture really threatens the last rich biodiverse places on Earth. So with that, my job in communications is to inspire people, to get people to move, to take action, to donate money, to build a base of advocates. And with that, I'm going to show a very complicated slide, but we'll hopefully make sense of it when I get into the messaging. And this is our theory of change around mobilizing millions of people. The way to look at this slide is to go all the way to the right and look at the organization's goals. All right, so this is about 2 years old, but we were defining some of the really big goals that we had that we wanted to accomplish by 2020. So species populations thriving, a significant increase in marine protected areas, so on down the line, forests protected, reducing carbon. But in order to mobilize people, because people are a part of this equation, they're not the only piece of the equation to getting this kind of conservation work done, but to mobilizing millions of people, where we look at is really developing a focused message. How do you develop a really focused message that's easy for people to understand and digestible and build communications around that? You then build out communities that amplify that message. So we have 1.2 million members. We have over 2.5 million people that we reach online through our email database. We have over 1.8 million people connected to us on social media, 10 million people who visit our website each year. But then we also engage celebrities, religious leaders, other trusted voices to amplify that message. That message results in asking people to do things, really directing urgent messages around active petitioning, asking people to make change, leaders convincing followers for very directed outcomes. And those outcomes typically are where governments are passing legislation, corporations are sourcing sustainably, or individuals are altering their footprint. All right, so all of that can help us reach those 2020 goals. So the case study that I wanted to walk through was one singular issue that has been an issue for a long time, and it's about illegal wildlife trade, is how we term it. But it's really about the slaughtering of the last endangered species to feed global marketplaces. And what you're seeing here is a slide of elephant tusks that are being confiscated by customs. The slaughter of elephants has increased by 8-fold in Kenya, for example, in the last several years. Over 30,000 elephants are killed each year to feed the ivory market. A lot of people think that issue has been solved. It's not at all. It's rapidly growing. This is a baby tiger cub that was found in someone's luggage. This is a very sad photo of one rhino with its horn and one rhino without its horn. So rhino horns are taken with greater and greater frequency to feed a market in Vietnam where it's believed to be a cure for cancer and also an aphrodisiac and a hangover cure. But this gives you an example of the urgency of the problem, where rhino poaching in South Africa has gone from as little as 13 individuals in 2007 to over 1,000 just last year. It's much like the war on drugs that we face, where there is just such huge demand, and it's very difficult to stop it. So this is a really big and complicated issue. It's funded by, in many cases, by war criminals. Joseph Kony actually uses illegal wildlife trade to fund much of his operations. So it's actually an international security issue as well. It's not just about protecting these wonderful and glorious animals. So we set out 2 years ago to really put focus on this issue. Now, it's an issue that WWF has been involved with for a very long time, but we set out to launch a campaign, and it was a global campaign among all of those organizations that I talked about earlier, all of the WWF offices around the world. And we set out with this 2020 goal in mind of how to keep endangered species thriving. And we launched this global illegal wildlife trade campaign with 5 primary goals. Now these goals, I think, get a little wonky, but one of the most important ones here was leadership at CITES. CITES is a convention on international trade in endangered species. It's an international agreement that 180 countries have voluntarily signed on to over since 1961, and it is the international law that governs the trade in endangered species. We needed the African heads of state to prioritize wildlife crime, to make it an important issue in their country so that they can stop the flow of animals leaving their countries for other parts of the world. We needed our own U.S. agencies to expand ranger and enforcement support around the world, and the U.S. government to integrate wildlife crime into its development and security agendas. That's a really tall order, but it is actually a security issue. And interestingly enough, the U.S., we often don't think about, these products are going to other markets. China is the largest market for illegal wildlife products. The U.S. is actually number 2. People are often surprised by that. Rhino horn and ivory is constantly confiscated in the U.S. So finally, to that point, we need U.S. consumers to stop buying illegal wildlife crime products here and abroad. So these are all really, really big things to accomplish. And let's see. And when we said, how do people digest this information? If we went out and said, this is what we're aiming to do, it sounds a lot like that. It's a lot of things. It's Africa, it's serious, it's tigers, it's demand. It's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, how do you make this simple and easy for people to understand? So we go back to that framework that I talked about with the messaging focus. And I said earlier, this is about illegal wildlife trade. That's a very distant sounding thing. What is that, like trade? For most people that sounds like economics and finance. And what we really did was we relabeled it crime. This is crime against nature, it's crime against these species, and it's also a very serious issue. This isn't just an issue about saving fuzzy animals. So what we wanted people to enroll in, if you will, or to become advocates for, is to stop wildlife crime and communicate that it is a serious issue. So with that messaging, we created a campaign using that overarching theme, and these 3, as we like to call them, charismatic megafauna, these 3 spokes species, the tiger, the rhino, and the elephant, and put into words what they might be saying if they were able to speak to you. So the tiger is saying, I am not a rug. The rhino is saying, I am not medicine. And the elephant is saying, I am not a trinket or a souvenir. I'm much more than that. And so this was, in this kind of messaging, as a nonprofit in the US, we have access to public service advertising. We participate in this marketplace. We get over $40 to $50 million of free advertising each year. It really is helpful for driving a message in a very localized way. Our first market for these were in Washington, D.C. And within 2 days, we had people from the U.S. State Department asking if they could get copies of our ads. So we knew we were reaching the right market. So that was a really great kickoff and start to this campaign. The rest of this, as it flows through, you'll see that we continued that singular message throughout all of our digital properties, so that you see it on our website, and you see it across social media, so there's Facebook posts and Twitter. You see it through regular media, and so some of the results, some of the work that we did to build this campaign throughout the year, and this was all through 2012, was to build a new base of advocates. And a lot of this, we had 1.1 million people that we signed up through change.org. Change.org is a wonderful platform of people who really care passionately about issues, and it was a great opportunity to engage them. We also gave them new ways to engage that people would have never thought of before. We gave them the opportunity to directly help and communicate with park rangers in Africa, so where they could send messages of gratitude to park rangers for the work that they do every day. So it really created a personal connection with our advocates. In addition to that, I'll skip to some of these. This is how that same framework, was built out for this campaign specifically, right? So these are the directed actions that we were looking for, and the outcomes that we were looking for. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee to take this seriously, the State Department, the UN. And so through the course of that year, we got 50 heads of state within Africa to sign on to committing to put an end to wildlife trade. You know, it's the first start, pledging to do it. One of those actions was the beginning of burning or crushing illegally caught or illegally confiscated elephant trunks. Or not the trunks, tusks, thank you. So as tusks are crushed and destroyed, it's a symbolic act that we won't stand for this, that these can never get into the hands of anyone else that can turn them into trinkets and souvenirs. We were able to brief the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and this is when John Kerry was not heading up the State Department, but was still in the Senate, and these are his words about illegal wildlife crime really making it a big issue. We were able to influence the State Department while Hillary Clinton was still the head of the State Department, held the first ever wildlife trafficking and conservation hearing within the State Department, pulling people from all over the world and industry together. And the New York Times even wrote about our ad campaign. This was a wonderful way to reach a very important and influential audience. But this was unique because it was the first time the advertising section of the New York Times ever picked up our campaign. We also engaged celebrity support. So there are a list of celebrities. Mark Ruffalo was mentioned earlier. He's got millions of followers. And Leonardo DiCaprio had signed on to our campaign, and that was a huge boost. We focused on a singular issue as we got through the rest of the year. And this is really where a lot of this all came together. And the CITES convention that I mentioned earlier was being held in Thailand. Thailand is one of the last remaining countries where the trade in ivory is still legal. Right? Now it's only Thai ivory that is from within the country that is legal. However, it's a total open market. It's an excuse for illegal ivory to be smuggled into the country and then traded pretty freely. So because of that, we were asking, the Prime Minister of Thailand was set to open up the conference at CITES. And we had what ended up being a 2-week push to get the Prime Minister of Thailand to announce in the opening of the CITES convention that Thailand would ban the sale of ivory. And it was we asked for it to be implemented within a year. We're still working on that, but we engaged Avaz, which is an online platform that hopefully many of you use, with Leonardo DiCaprio's support. We had over 1.2 million people sign this petition directed to the Prime Minister of Thailand. We had an op-ed in the Bangkok Post the night before the CITES convention opened. And the result of this is sort of the spectacle of the convention, asking for wildlife crime to be stopped. This was 500,000 signatures being delivered to the Prime Minister 2 days before the conference, before we got to 1.2 million. And on the morning of the CITES opening convention, the Prime Minister announced that she would put an end to the trade in ivory in Thailand. Now, it's not something that she alone can do. There are a lot of forces that have to come together to do that, but we felt really great about that accomplishment of building digital advocates in the US and around the world to make that happen. I've just been given the stop sign. There were some other things that happened that I'll just flip through. So stop with Obama creating the first ever wildlife trafficking committee. $45 million was actually appropriated in the federal budget for the first time ever this year. We in the US crushed all of our own ivory, which was held in a warehouse outside of Denver. And senators on both and congresspeople from both sides of the House have supported this issue. Even the royal family across the pond has gotten engaged, and it's been a big issue there for a long time. But the hope is that these animals are cherished and live with us forever.